Siobhan, if we don't tell him it's been 3 weeks, do you think we can get away with just pretending it's only been 2?
I guess we'll have to see. We have no choice.
Okay. Quick. Start.
Hello and welcome to the Sohbet Podcast, where we talk about spiritual things with friends with a very little s on that spiritual.
You've forgotten the whole thing.
What's
we
the
talk
other thing?
about it's because in the 2 weeks that it's been since the last episode.
Oh, what a long 2 weeks. Felt so long.
Managed to forget the fact that we are actually discussing fun, art, meaning, transcendence, awe and wonder.
Oh yeah, I thought it was longer than that. I thought we really fleshed out that.
I think we added democracy last.
No, let's retrieve that because we did.
I think we were adding them throughout. We'll keep adding them.
It's terrible.
We'll keep adding them.
We'll keep adding them. My name's Siobhan.
My name's Dave.
Woo! We remembered
yes,
that.
And we are the Sohbet Podcast. Although,
yeah.
So we're considering maybe
another
having
name change.
having only changed our name 5 episodes ago,
if that. Yeah.
Which, if it was 5 episodes, that means it's exactly 10 weeks. Because as we might have made clear, this is
it's only been 2 weeks.
A fortnightly podcast.
We've never missed one.
And we have a small problem with the name Sohbet Podcast, which has come to my attention.
Well, I did point it out quite a while ago.
No, I know.
But I didn't realise it was going to be so detrimental.
And I didn't know it was.
nice.
Well, so the issue with it is, so when we decided on this name, we made a point, probably because we were just being twats, of not bothering to double check, whether it was going to show up on your Insta or whether it was going to, get much traction online. And that's fine. I'm glad we did that.
Well, it's because also I guess they weren't things that we cared about.
No, and there's still. I want to. This is why I'm going into a long spiel. I still don't want to care about it, but there is a slight problem with the name Sohbet Podcast, in as much as if you, the listener, who, as we established last week, are the people making this anyway. And if you didn't listen last week, then that won't make any sense to you. So you go back and listen to that. For example, if you think to yourself, I like this podcast, it's a good podcast, this. Do you know what? I've got a friend who'd love this podcast. This is right up their street. Got to tell them about it. And you meet them, hopefully in real life, not on your Facebook wall. And you say to them, God, you know what? There's this podcast that's really for you. You'd really love it. And you'd love all of the things that they talk about. I don't know who that person is.
I was about to say, who on earth is that person?
But I'm just presuming.
That poor person.
And they say, yeah, it's called the Sohbet Podcast. And that person thinks, God, do you know what? I really like podcasts. And that sounds right up my street. Those guys sound great. They wouldn't be able to find us.
Yeah. Turns out Sohbet is the Arabic word for conversation. Most podcasts are about conversations.
So unless, I assume, the people that are listening, and thank you so much for listening.
Yeah.
Are, I guess, people that were already listening to Breakfast Punx and maybe see on Instagram every time or maybe they've followed us.
I promise you no one's looking at Instagram.
Okay,
well, if they are, they're very quiet.
Well, we have got quite a lot of followers on Spotify left over from the Breakfast Punx days. So I assume, anyway, that somehow you're finding us.
Yeah.
Which is wonderful, but it does mean that no one else is ever going to be able to find us again. So we might need to change the name again. Ooh. And we're thinking, I don't know, we're thinking Sohbet Punx.
Just to add the punks back in, throwback from before.
Yeah, it's a throwback for the old podcast.
Yeah.
And I think it probably means that if you then type in Sohbet Punx to Google, you don't get 3 million hits of people speaking in Arabic.
Yeah. And also, I think it is our Instagram handle. Is it called a handle? I don't know.
I don't know.
People might already think it's called that. I don't know.
Yeah.
Who knows?
But
maybe we will officially call it that.
Yeah, so maybe in the next couple of weeks, and it will be 2 weeks between the last.
Because there's always 2 weeks. I don't know what happened to that last week if you think it's been 3.
Well, time is a concept, isn't it? That's the other thing. Time doesn't really exist. There's an interesting story about time.
Yeah?
That's not really a story about time, I suppose. It's about omphaloses.
What?
I'm not sure if
I'm
saying that quite right. No, an omphalos is something which I might have told this story before, but I'm in it now.
I've never heard that word.
Okay, good. An omphalos is like something that we base everything else on.
Oh, okay.
So it's like an absolute. So like gravity.
Yeah.
would be an omphalos, because the fact that you walk around, it involves having gravity. It's like
something that we all accept is a truth, and then we can base other things from that.
Yeah, kind of like an absolute, just something that just goes without saying, but also has huge influence on our life. And of course, time was just made up once. I mean, it doesn't actually exist. It's just numbers that we've applied to. Time in the context of like days exists, of course, because it gets dark at night. But actually, those little numbers that you look at on your watch, they don't really exist. But on top of that, the omphalos of time is Greenwich Mean Time.
Yeah.
Because every time a thing around the world, probably partly because of empire, probably not because of great reasons, but every single person's time is based, 0 is Greenwich Mean Time. And then, obviously you add on hours from there. And there was arguments at the time, I'm not going to say the year, I'm guessing probably 17th century.
Cool, that sounds right.
Maybe, but I don't know. That's completely made up. Where loads of other people put in bids to be like the equivalent of Greenwich Mean Time.
Okay.
And France were very keen, because they didn't like us much, the French, back then.
Fair enough. They wanted to own time.
They wanted to own time, but we came through, guys. Blighty came through. But had that been the case, our time would have been different, because 0 would have been French time.
And so they won ahead?
It would have, they won ahead. So it would have gone round the world from 0, and we would be the last in the line. So time would just be slightly different.
Also, don't they have to add on a second every now and then?
Yes.
So isn't the whole point of time just a little bit silly if every now and then we have to correct it anyway?
Yeah, there's a slight difference, isn't there? I think they add on a second every... It's a number of years.
Yeah,
it's quite a long time. You have to add on a second, which means my little Casio digital watch must be falling out of time all the time.
Sorry, listeners.
Did you just spend the last 2 minutes calling me a twat?
No.
Good.
I apologise to the listeners for the small delay in collecting our post from the door.
Well, it wasn't post, Siobhan. It was the gas man taking a meter reading. And I tried to explain to him that the numbers on the meter reading, they're not real, are they?
Is that what you tried to say to that man?
Yeah.
I'm sure he's really impressed with you. Oh, dear.
So that's time.
Sorted that out.
So we usually start this podcast by saying one thing. So I'm a bit out of breath. We're on the third floor, ladies and gentlemen. I like to run downstairs. So
I'll go first then.
we usually start this podcast by saying one thing that we have that has. Jesus Christ!
Gas man stole your words.
By saying one thing which has happened to us over the last 2 weeks, and I can't stress it enough, it has been 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Which has created fun, art, meaning, transcendence, awe, or wonder in our lives. What have you been up to, my darling wife?
Oh, thank you, my stupendous husband. Careful my words.
You missaid stupid.
I know, I did. Oh, it's a shame. Well, in this incredibly long 2 weeks that we had, I'm ashamed to say that I have not done a lot of deliberate acts of making my life have more of those things. Although actually, now that the list has increased, I think I can actually add a few things in.
Well, you can add things to the list too, of course.
Yeah, true, just to make my last really long 2 weeks fit. No, I came to thinking that actually I've been a bit slack on my routines and the things that give me meaning. The books I've chosen to read haven't exactly imparted me with a ton of wisdom, and my meditations through the I haven't really done it in 3 weeks. It's in the poops. And it's one of them things where I'm journaling like every other 2 or 3 days, and I'm finding myself being like, gosh, every day I'm just thinking, oh yeah, do something better tomorrow. And I think that's some place that many people find themselves in, that kind of...
I think that's probably where most people live.
That's it. And I think I've been really lucky to have fairly good routines that mean that you avoid even having to think about that, even if what you do every day is really simple. And that's the way to make it stick. But I just think I've done that stupid thing where I've put pressures on myself to somehow do it differently or better, and forgotten that even doing anything or appreciating what you're doing is the whole point. So when we were going to record this, accurately, probably about a week and a half in, because it's only been 2 weeks, of course.
Yeah.
So when we had planned to record this a little while ago, I was really struggling. At that point, I was kind of beating myself up a little bit about having really done nothing. But then I tried to do a bit more of a appreciate what's happened so far sort of thing, and actually find the meaning in the little things, which I think is the whole point of this in some ways. Some of it is, let's deliberately do something that's going to make your world bigger, and some of it is actually realizing how big your world already is. So a couple of things. I have a friend at the gym who's going through an extraordinarily difficult time right now. Their sister is dying of cancer, essentially, and we were just talking. She's so strong mentally anyway, and she was saying, I'm so strong mentally, but I know it's coming. I know, not it being the death, but I just know eventually, probably soon after my sister has, passes away, I'm going to just fall apart. And so we were talking really honestly about that. And I gave her our copy of, I'm going to bring it up pretty much every week, it turns out.
It has been every week this far.
But Soul for Happy by Mo Gaudet. Because A, it's incredibly positive and wonderful, and B, he has a son who passes away, and it's coming from a point of view before that, because the book was meant to be written with him, and then it's about his application of an equation for happiness and just his mindset and how he managed to get through it and keep strong. But more the point is, I love that you can give someone, when was the last time you lent someone a book? It sounds really pathetically boring, and most people would be like, oh, who reads? Or do you read? How many people read physical books still? I don't know. You work in a bookshop, so you see a lot more of it. But it's just really nice to hand someone a book and say, I really think this is going to be good for you. Do what you want with it. And if you like it, give it to someone else. And that kind of, that's why we do. I mean, one of the reasons we do a podcast is to talk about and share things that have been useful for us. But to physically do it in person, I don't do that often. So it was really lovely to just be I actually, I think you're going to really enjoy this. Here's also him talking on a podcast before, if you really want to get a feel for what this guy's like, and then go at it and fully immerse yourself in this person's idea.
We did a lot of, we'll get to this, but we did a lot of bashing of sort of everything, I think, on the last episode of this podcast. But it has to be brought up again, because there is no physical thing to give to anybody anymore, is there? So the equivalent of that would be sharing the podcast to somebody's wall. Yeah. Right? And there's not really anything wrong with that as such. And there's definitely nothing wrong with that if they get loads out of the podcast. I mean, it doesn't take anything away from the thing itself. But that feeling that you got is very much, I think, something you can only really get from physically doing that in person. Yeah. And I think the physical has been maybe for the best, definitely environmentally for the best, but the physical's been taken away, hasn't it?
And I think the physical involves so much more. It's not just the thought. It's it's an interaction with another person that isn't just your, I want to say thoughts, but it's not just your thoughts in your speech, because it's what you type, and what you type is not what comes out your mouth and what comes out your brain necessarily. That sounds mad. I know what I mean by that. You can people portray themselves as all sorts on the internet, whereas I think a face-to-face genuine reaction, absorbing the emotions and the reactions of another person through their their body language and their
eyes,
emotions and their eyes, you just don't have that online. So I think sharing things, sharing stuff about yourself with a person, as opposed to just blanket sharing it online. Blanket sharing it online means you don't know who's going to understand it, who's going to read it and you don't really care. You just kind of, you're going for the mass market there. Like, I hope everyone knows this, so I haven't got to say it. And there is a use to that. I've got a friend who's got a brain tumour and didn't want to tell everyone one by one. So they went, look, I'm going to do this once. I have a brain tumour, and just put it on the internet. And now he knows everyone knows. But that's good for them in some respects. But some people do it and then just assume everyone knows something without ever having to really have an emotional connection and conversation with someone. And I just really appreciate it. It's because this person at the gym who, like, I know pretty well. I wouldn't say they're my closest friend, but they're like someone who I know well at the gym and would be one of my closest gym friends. She was sharing so much about herself, and she doesn't have social media. She deliberately doesn't have social media and you know, doesn't connect in that way. So to her, that face-to-face is really important. And I was just really, you know, honoured that I could be a part of her sharing, and then you know, lucky enough to have come across things that I'm like, well, actually I've managed to have all of this wisdom and stuff in my life, and I can share it. And that's the whole point of having it, isn't just to like keep it for yourself and be like, ooh, I'm the wisdom hoard. Not that that's a thing, but like,
I am the wisdom
I am
hoard.
the wisest. But no, and I'm not wise either. But the idea of, you know, you grow yourself in order to help other people and be with other people. That's the only point of existing as far as I see it. And so to actually do that physically feels so much different. It feels real. Whereas doing it online doesn't fulfill anything. If you shared something to someone, they went, oh, thank you. You feel, you know, I don't know, you feel nothing. I don't feel good or bad. I just feel like empty and like it wasn't a thing.
But first of all, they wouldn't say thank you. And this isn't really anything against the person doing it, but they would click a heart, or they would do a like, or put a
or it'd be over
face.
the top, like, oh my God, thank you so much. But like, it's not real. Whereas just a short, sharp, like, here's a book, I think it'd be really helpful. Oh, that's awesome, thank you. Just means so much more. So, I don't know, it's simple.
We talked about this as well. I think there is something about the middleman aspect of not just social media, but almost anything. I mean, it's true of like even text messaging or whatever. There's a middle thing between you and the other person, even if it's not. And the middle thing in the case of social media is a fucking horrible, evil corporation who are purposefully messing with your brain chemicals. So that makes it metaphorically worse. But I think the sort of practicalities that you're talking about, it's like there's still something in between you and the other person.
Well, for one, it's time. Like, not that time exists, of course.
Time doesn't
we did
exist,
establish
Siobhan.
that.
Jesus
but like,
Christ.
a conversation is here and now, and you're going to get my immediate reaction, which I think is where we're sometimes most honest. Although probably not most thoughtful. And that's something that, for me, I'd really love to like mean everything I say first time round. I'm terrible at that. I usually speak and then I go, oh shit, I wish I'd thought.
There's an argument there to say that what you say is actually the truth of how you feel. So one of the things, what you've just described there is also, and I'm not saying that this is a bad thing, but what you've said there is also a description of kind of us picking and choosing our words so that we sound at our best at all times. Which of course you can and everybody does do on social media.
But that's the thing.
It's like so all of the different opinions that I'm expected to have, I will explain to you now. Yeah. But potentially, we've all got a dark underbelly to our consciousnesses, and so sometimes your first reaction is actually the most truthful, even if it's not. Once you've considered it, and it's that thinking fast and slow thing. Once you've considered it, yes, you can not say something that's quite insulting or or oversharing or whatever. But your first reaction is to do that. Yeah. And that's healthy. That's good. We need that first reaction.
And I agree.
And society needs that first reaction, I think, because we all need to be honest about the fact that we're all fucking arseholes.
But I would, and social media, we always end up on a social media bash. But social media or just any form of connectivity that isn't face-to-face immediate, like a phone call, no one phones each other anymore, but if you text, you've got time to think about that reply. Whereas if you're on the phone or if you're face-to-face, you're, like you say, your system one voice is going to speak, which is your honesty.
I don't know, I've seen people text them with other people though, and I don't know that much thought's going into that. If you're just furiously, sometimes it's furious, and I assume that they're having a conversation online. I think that's very much the same thing, probably.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, it's still
maybe, but there's something about that face-to-face connection that yeah, this was just a really good opportunity that brought together a few different lovely little things. So yeah, so when I was thinking about this before, I thought I had nothing, but I think that the more I thought about it, I was like, actually, I'm really glad that my life, everything that had happened to me led to a point where I had read that book, been interested in that person, been at that gym, met this person, and our little paths met in a way that I think was really helpful. Whereas so often our paths meet with people that you just think, what was the point of that? And there's never not a point, but sometimes it's not the most obvious. Whereas I think that one was like, this is really lovely.
Well, that's the bizarre chaos of the journey that we're all on, though, isn't it? So it just so happened that something happened in somebody else's life, and you happen to have, a long time ago or a little while ago, read a book. The reason you read that book was based on some reason, and the reason that happened was based on some other reason, and you could probably trace that all the way back to the fact that you were even born and you even exist, or you live in the same town or whatever. So there's the chaos of interacting. It's like completely random as to how you ended up in the same room as someone with that, equipped with that information.
And that's the thing. It's not really, and I wouldn't say that that's fate. It's exactly chaos, but it's paying attention enough to, I don't know, or just being lucky enough to have those interactions, or paying attention, I think. But
it shows how much we can all do for each other's lives, though, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, again, so one of the, we'll talk about it later, but one of the things we were very aware of is that on the last episode of this podcast we were sort of a bit neggy, so we're going to try and talk more positively. But I think this ultimately might even be the point of all of our lives, is that everything we do, everything we've done, our entire histories, and for some of us those histories are quite long, everything you've learned, every mistake you've made, every book you've read, every song you've heard, every idea that you've come across, everything you've ever overheard someone else say, everything creates you to be the person who then finds themselves in a situation tomorrow where you could potentially be of use to somebody.
I love that. And actually, I think that's our entire purpose for existing, if we're going to go there. I mean,
apart from fun, art, meaning, transcendence, awe, and wonder.
Well, so I'm reading, just to very quickly drop another book in that I'm reading at the minute. It's the Songlines by Bruce Chatwin, I think his name is, written in the 80s, and it's about the Aboriginals of Australia and the fact that they have these lines across, or the Aboriginals believe there's lines across the country that their ancestors plotted out. They travelled and they sang along the way, and their song kind of explains the route. It's a bit mystical, but it's also very practical. And the idea is that families will continue teaching the next person the song, and depending how far they've travelled will be how much of the song they've learnt. But one of the concepts, at least, that this guy is explaining, or exploring anyway, is the fact that one of the purposes of humans, for whatever reason, is to be migratory, is to always travel and to never stay in one place. If you stay in one place, you become stagnant, you don't learn, you don't meet other people, on a very basic level. But there was just, he's got reasons upon reasons as to why we're migratory. But that would fit with the being with other people thing, because back in the days, if you were tribal and you just stayed with your one tribe, you never explored the world, you never become helpful to anyone else, you never learn anything new, you just literally get up every day and just do that one thing in your area.
You're describing the modern world.
No, I know.
Right.
And and I think he was coming out from a point of view of the 80s where maybe I don't know, that
just as bad in that.
I imagine there would have been a period of time where it was becoming a bit like that, but yeah, it's just really interesting. I'm just reading that a bit at the minute. I'm like, gosh, people, we're the opposite of that now. Like, kids are growing up playing games and not leaving their house. We don't really want to know who our neighbours are or go anywhere, and if we do go anywhere, we want it to be luxurious and da-da-da-da. But yeah, I just like the idea of our purpose just being to meet each other.
Also, don't you think that the song lines, in the context of what you've just described, is an exact, maybe, I'm sure this is why you brought it up, but I'm sorry to just like teach everyone to suck eggs, but
That's
I'm sure everyone noticed this, but it's an exact metaphor for what we were just discussing, right? As in, our journey through life is the song line.
Yeah,
the more of the song that we learn, the more we can provide for somebody tomorrow.
Yes. 100%.
And the more the migration could also be a metaphor. Actually, it's the migration is also changing yourself over time and learning new things and, you know, becoming
100%. And this is what we lose by not having things, not to keep coming back to it, but like when we dispel the wisdom of the older people or everything that came before us, which is what such things like, again, I'm not going to be anti-science, but when you have science and you lose magic and religion, well, magic and religion are 60,000 years old, at least magic is, and then religion comes along in the, like, I don't know, 3,000 years ago. But when we abolish all of that because science in the last 200 years has taught us that all of that is complete bullshit, we have a little bit of a problem where we're like, oh, our human race is only 200 years old. If you go by that, if you go by what we've learned, and if we forget everything that we thought was stupid to us. Well, but I think which is a shame.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I think you can, and again, this isn't necessarily a bad thing. I don't bring this up to, you know, there's definitely positive aspects of this, but this is also happening with even closer history, because one of the problems with all of those ideas is that they all came from white men from the West. And so one of the good aspects of now is that we're looking to other voices and we're trying to learn from other people. And of course, so for example, that songlines book that you just described is obviously, this is a type of knowledge which was ignored. It existed. It's older than any of our Western religions. So it existed, but we just ignored it because we were racists.
Yeah, ignored and also put it down. Just not just ignore. We like said those people are redneck idiots. Like, I don't want to know about that. But
the thing is that what we're doing we are throwing the baby out with the bathwater a little bit, because the thing is, that's great. That's fucking brilliant. We need to do that. But there's actually also nothing wrong with looking back on the sort of ancient wisdom of old white people too, and also you know, within. So I often think about this in the context of philosophy, philosophical voices right up until probably the 50s, I suppose. But you know, that's not entirely true, because Wollstonecraft, I suppose, would have been an early one. But it's very rare that there is a female, almost no black voices at all. And so if you look at philosophy, you say, that just looks awful. Looks awful to learn anything from those people, because they're just old white men from, you know, very privileged backgrounds for the most part, very educated, definitely not for the most part, you know, working class in any way. But we have to be careful not to lose that wisdom, because that's a very important aspect of wisdom as well. We just have to include, and the problem is what you replace it with. And this is what we talked a bit about last week, and so I'm going to go straight back to being negi, I suppose. But what we're replacing it with at the moment is just sort of, well, it's pricks like us, probably, or, you know, the equivalent of, just like coming up with modern arguments for things. Which is great, you know, and I'm sure some of those modern arguments are brilliant, but if you're learning everything from social media, is what I'm trying to say, you're going to lose, you know, Socratic reasoning, for one thing.
It's interesting, isn't it? There's so much that if we held our modern day morals to everything we've learnt from history and said, well, I'm not going to listen to that person because of this, we'd have very little. I mean, there's not a single person from history that didn't probably do something that we would now consider abhorrent. I mean, slavery is the obvious massive one that almost every sort of famous historical figure that we're all aware of. If they didn't literally have slaves, they did have slaves. They might have called them something different. Well, even in far more recent times, I can't remember which book, and I can't even remember his name now. You're definitely going to know his name. But there was a German philosopher who popped up in the Religion for Atheists book, and there were some wonderful quotes, and I was like, gosh, this guy is amazing. And then you only have to dig a tiny bit to find out he was a fully blown Nazi. And then you're just like, oh, well, that's something to reckon with a little bit.
But then I suppose, is it? And that's a much bigger question that we're going to have to get onto at some point. I know you read a book about this not too long ago, Monsters, which is definitely worth everybody's time. But you know, are his ideas Nazis? You know, are someone else's ideas? You know, do they own slaves? Do the ideas own slaves? Of course they don't. And I'm being a bit facetious, but No, and I'm not saying that the conversation shouldn't happen. It definitely should. But and we've got really fucking deep very early, haven't we? But it's I just think we need to be careful that we don't just stop learning from sources that are older than 10 years ago.
100%.
Because we aren't. We've said this before. Since 2012, we've been at our stupidest.
Yeah.
Like that's been proven scientifically.
Mm-hmm.
Mobile phone use, internet use has made us all lack focus, lack discipline.
Mm-hmm.
Our diets have got worse. Our health has got worse, which means that our brains aren't as good as they once were. And so we might have access to every single piece of information ever, but we are us, literally me, Dave, and you, Siobhan, and every single person listening to this who is also creating this podcast with their ears, are stupider than our ancestors.
Stupider. It proves the
point. Well, there you go. And we have to be aware of that. I think we have to take that into consideration before we start saying, oh, yeah, but we know way more about philosophy than any of those people did.
But the philosophers themselves who came up with these profound and amazing ideas, if they were lucky, owned one book.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I'd never even considered it. And then someone pointed out once. Like,
I did on the last episode of this podcast.
Oh, did you? Well,
so we're going back.
Well, it was a very long
material.
2 weeks, so I don't really remember. But yeah, it's just fascinating to me that we have everything at our, like you said, everything's at our fingertips, and we're dumb as hell.
Well, we're not dumb as hell. That's maybe taking it to a further point. But we don't think as clearly as our ancestors did. Yeah. Because we don't have the space.
Yeah.
And we're all perfectly happy to accept this as well, of course. Because if I were to say that in slightly different words and say, God, there's the stress epidemic going on and an anxiety epidemic going on, we'd all go, yeah, it's terrible, isn't it, that we've got this stress epidemic and this anxiety epidemic. Well, what do you think those two things do to us all? If you're stressed all the time and you're anxious all the time and you can't concentrate on things as a result, then you're stupider.
Stupider.
I'm going to keep using it.
If you keep using it, you just sound more clever. So it's fine.
But that it goes. That's the thing. It's the sort of the negative aspect. But we shouldn't be so pompous to not acknowledge that.
Yeah, I agree.
So we should probably listen to, but very importantly, we should be listening to Aboriginal, and certainly like Native American wisdom. There's loads of things that we could learn from, and even to some extent, obviously we've talked about Buddhism and things, but there's so much wisdom within Hinduism and and these things, particularly in the West, whilst admittedly, Buddhism obviously became a bit cool and lots of white people went and did yoga, but those things they were of a similar ilk. They were ignored because we were racists. Yeah,
we're all but also not just racist, but like pompous. Religion's stupid. Once you tarnish everything that looks slightly religious.
Well, no, I'm talking about a long time ago. So I'm talking about people that thought, well, Christianity, Church of England's correct.
Right,
that's more what I was talking about. But I mean, equally, going back to our kind of probably our USP. Throwing religion entirely out wasn't necessarily the wisest thing.
Yeah, and even I think I've referenced this magic book before, but I think it's Chris Godson wrote a book, The History of Magic, and the whole point was about thinking about the wisdom that we learned before science turned up. And it's just like people would look at tribal things or religious, not just religious things, magical things or ritualistic things as backwards and weird. And it's like, yeah, but they existed for like tens of thousands of years. There must have been some use to it. And we've just banished that bit. And I know you've done a lot of work on ritual. Maybe we can do that sometime.
A lot of work. You make me sound like some sort of a historian, academic.
You did an essay on rituals.
I wrote an essay in my Open University degree.
Well, future Dave and future Siobhan, remember the book Monster. We're going to have to go back to monsters and discussing that at some point. And rituals, definitely.
There you go. There's something to look forward to.
But for now...
ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, I know. And also a promise that I don't intend on necessarily keeping. But if we say it out loud, it might happen. But just to bring it back to our normal methods of things, Dave, what have you done in the last couple of weeks that has brought you fun or meaning, transcendence, or again, because I can't remember what the first bit says on your list. Oh, art and wonder.
Yeah, I was in the wrong order.
That's fine.
So I don't know what to do now, actually, because there was a couple and I was sort of umming and ahhing about them. But I think, actually, on that point that you just made about remembering to go back to things, there's a bunch of stuff that we've discussed in the past that I just very quickly want to sort of mention.
Oh, okay.
One of which was that one of my versions of this was Armoured Saint, the thrash metal bands that I was going to say starring with John Bush.
I mean, he is the star.
He is the star of that band. And I think when we discussed it, we'd been listening to their albums a lot, and we were about to go and see them live. We did go and see them live a couple of weeks ago,
August 17th.
There you go. And
very recent.
Yeah, within the last 2 weeks,
course.
obviously, because that's how long it's been since the podcast. Fantastic.
Oh, so good.
I mean, that filled me. That was definitely fun. It was definitely a form of art. Filled me with meaning. I think it was quite transcendent, and I was definitely in awe. And I think in awe and in wonder.
In awe of the bush.
Well, of the whole thing. I mean, they were a fucking great band. They're not young fellas.
Oh no.
But they were supported by a band called Tailgunner, who are young people. And I can't decide, because to me, I was looking at them and I was thinking, God, they must be like teenagers, but they're probably 30. I just don't know. I don't know.
Early 20s.
Okay, early 20s.
Yeah.
But I don't know how to age people anymore.
True.
But they sound exactly like a Nwabum band from 1980,
which is 100. Like that's exactly what they're going.
They're going for it. And it is a bit of a pastiche.
Yeah,
it does tick a lot of the boxes of things about the world that we currently live in that I would normally moan about.
Yeah.
But
you just so happen to like
them.
They
were just really good. Yeah, they were really good. They've got an album out, and the album's fucking brilliant.
Yeah.
So that's great. Another one, this is going way back, and no one's going to be interested in this at all, but
I think you should definitely talk about it.
No, I want to talk about it. I think on the first version of the Sohbet podcast, the first time we asked this question, I talked about Kurt Vonnegut.
Yeah.
And one of the things that came up, I remembered in the middle of the night, about 3 nights ago, was this early noughties, or maybe late 90s, new metal band called Kilgore that were, if you remember this, then you really are a great listener. But I said at the time I was going to buy their album, and I did buy their album, and I just wanted to update you all. It was as bad as I expected.
It was terrible.
It was like, so if you remember rightly, so they're named after Kilgore. One of the reasons that I read Kurt Vonnegut in the first place was the singer from this band had given an interview in either Metal Hammer or Kerrang, or might even been Raw magazine. It might even been that old. And he had said they'd named themselves. They were really literary, and they'd named themselves after this Kurt Vonnegut.
They had to be something, because they weren't good.
Yeah, turns out. And this, I just remember this singer being quite pompous. Anyway, he has one of the most unpleasant singing voices I've ever heard in my life. And I didn't realise that until I got the album from Discogs. I think it was £1.29, so I didn't lose out on too much. But yeah, they were. I mean, the lyrics, for a literary heavy metal band, as they describe themselves, the lyrics are so embarrassing. I just wanted to bring that up, because I did say, I'm going to buy the album and I'll let you all know what it was like. Well, that's what it was like. Shit. It was shit.
So any fun, art, meaning, transcendence, or wonder out of that?
No.
Oh, that's a shame.
But here's maybe a point, which is, I think, worth making. The idea of the band filled me definitely with meaning, and possibly even with like awe and wonder.
Also, it led you to Kurt Vonnegut. So whilst they, may not have brought you musical genius in the way you kind of maybe hoped, they opened your world to your favourite author you've ever read.
Absolutely. No, 100%. So in that context, yes. But what I was going to say is more that I should have left it alone. Sometimes having every single piece of information at your fingertips at all time. This is a very good example of what's wrong. What's wrong with this? Yeah, no, I know. It just jumped into my head.
God, you're good.
Is that the idea of this band, Kilgore?
Yeah.
The best part of 30 years probably since I first read an interview with them as a teenager. My concept of them was that they were one thing.
Yeah.
And then I had the opportunity because of the internet. Basically, I had the opportunity. I mean, and I could have listened to it a lot sooner. I thought I was being all fucking annoying about it by not just getting it up on YouTube or Spotify or whatever, and actually buying the CD. But if I just left it alone and never listened to them ever again, then I would have had, every time I thought of them, and it would probably only be between now and when I die, it would probably be about 20 times, but I would have had a little nice warm feeling of thinking to myself, God, that band, I bet they were really good. I'm so happy that they introduced me to Kurt Vonnegut. Isn't that wonderful? What a lovely little moment this is for myself to share with myself. But now, if I ever think of them, I'll just think, God, that band turned out to be shit.
But they still introduced you to.
No, absolutely. But what I'm saying is, it's just tarnished slightly. It hasn't really. It hasn't tarnished the then experience that I had. And again, talking about my songline is very full of Kurt Vonnegut.
But I think it's important to, I don't know, because the risk reward, they could have been amazing. It's the same with going to see bands that have come back that you think, oh, do I go see them? Will that ruin it for me? Case in point, who I was worried one way was Def Leppard. I was like, oh, if we go see them, they're going to be awful. Yeah. Spoiler alert, they're not awful. They're really, really, really amazing. Oh, piss right off.
No, I think we've had different experices. Okay,
well,
because we've seen them sadly enough more than once. I've seen them about.
I only remember them a couple times. Alcohol wins, but I don't know. But there are some bands, especially in the era of all these bands getting back together and playing, and you just think, is it going to be worth it? I don't know. I think you've got to do it to know.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You do. But but I'm not really saying therefore you should never find out about anything. Of course you should. Yeah. I'm just saying that therein lies the risk reward. If the world was different, let's just say that when I was 18, I don't know, found a magazine from 20 years before, and there was an interview with a band called Kilgore. And one of them talks about Kurt Vonnegut, and as a result of that, whatever, blah, 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 blah. And then it followed the same path, but I was living in the 90s. I literally wouldn't have been able to ever hear them, or at least hear them again. I'm saying if I was 20 years older, basically, so place me in a time when the internet didn't exist, I would never have known. And I would have never had any way of knowing unless by some pure fluke of chance I walked into a second-hand record shop and there was I happened to look in the K section on that day and it was there. Do you know what I mean? I'm not really making a point with that, but I'm just saying it's like I'm only pointing out as this is the risk of the modern world that we're in, is that knowing everything brings a lot of good, but it brings loads of shit, and probably brings more shit than it brings good.
So much shit. Yeah, no, I agree.
So anyway, neither of those are my actual thing.
Are they not?
No.
So what's your thing from the...
So...
God, this is good.
Yeah, I know. So my thing is going to be, it is music related though, it is the new Red Cross album.
Yay!
So agreed. Red Cross are, I hope everybody knows,
people might not. I didn't know who they were.
Well, they weren't really an early American hardcore band, but they were very much adjacent with the early LA hardcore scene. Yeah. That's where they came from. They never really played hardcore music in the way that... Well, no, I mean, it got a lot poppier. So, I mean, their early stuff is sort of, somewhat. Okay. But they just continued. They've never stopped. Yeah. And
we did discuss them very briefly back in the Breakfast Punx days. Oh, when we talked about that documentary of people going out into the desert.
Oh, yeah.
Because they were one of the bands that went out to the desert and played in the 80s.
They did. Yeah. But yeah, through the 80s and the 90s, they had a completely different career to all of those sort of early hardcore bands, pretty much. Well, most of them, anyway. And they sort of, they signed to some major labels. They had a couple of different sort of almost hits, and they got big-ish again in the sort of 90s around grunge, and they just sat well with sort of everything. But they were very much, by the 80s, they were very much making like pop rock music, I suppose. Really good. Yeah. Pop rock makes it sound trashy. It's not trashy. It's fucking brilliant. But and anyway, they've made a new album. It must be at least it's probably 12 years or something after the one before it or something. It's been a long time anyway. And I heard a song off of it on YouTube. Oh. So I mean, I did do it was the devil's work for a second there. But it sounded really good, so I refused to listen to anything else until I could get it. It was hard to get, actually, a CD in CD form.
Yeah. Did you have to order it to HMV?
No. HMV haven't even got it. It's not even on their system.
David.
And no, I have have I said this already? I've pre-ordered the new Jesus Lizard album, which is coming out in a couple of weeks now.
Yeah.
And
you've already gone in on the wrong day to collect that.
I have. I tried to collect it a month early already, and they gave me a funny look. And yeah, I haven't listened to anything. I know they've released some songs off of that. I'm refusing to listen to that until
Gotta go without to go with, David.
That's
a Cohen.
That is
one
of my sayings. And but this Red Cross album, anyway, it's fucking great. It's really good. And that's it, really. There's not really anything more to it. But the songs are extraordinarily happy. The lyrics are fucking beautiful.
Yeah.
All just about being kind and having fun,
being kind,
and that sort of thing. And and I think Red Cross are another band that they were sort of a band that have popped up in my life here and there. They're not a band that I've been a fan of obsessively since I was young. I heard some of their stuff in the early 90s, I think, or mid 90s probably, and I liked it, but I didn't necessarily follow up on that. And then every now and again I'll stumble across them and enjoy them. And I've bought their albums since, like their earlier albums, and the earlier albums are all fantastic. But I wasn't necessarily expecting that much. I mean, I don't know, there must be around 60. It's two brothers. They're not young men. And perfectly possible that they could have made an absolute embarrassment of themselves, but they didn't. They've made one of their best albums, I think, ever. And they're writing a book, or they've written a book which is coming out soon about them, and there's a documentary which has been made about them, and they're all coming out all in one, so it's going to be a busy year. I imagine they might be playing in the UK at some point.
They might do.
In which case I would very much like to see them live.
Oh, hopefully we will. And then that'll be your ultimate all-wonder experience when you get to connect it all together in a big heap of probably crying, knowing you.
Well, that's a bit weird.
In the nicest way.
Yeah. The man who never cried is now being accused of crying.
No, you probably will. You might. But it'll be lovely. I imagine that they are a very... I can imagine seeing them would be quite an experience of the heart.
I think that they are just pure joy.
Yeah,
I don't know how they've managed it. They must have had a very nice upbringing,
or
they must be very difficult people that manage to hide it well. But they write such joyous music, and they just seem extraordinarily happy. I've seen that they've done there was a load when the album came out. They'd obviously done loads of podcasts, and because I'd watched something on YouTube, they all came up on my suggested thing. And most of the podcasts that they were being interviewed on, were just like this. It was just sort of like 75 people had listened to it or something. And it was just obviously some sort of girl in her bedroom just asking them some questions. They're just, don't know, just wonderful.
Generous, don't take anything too seriously, but they're probably quite serious about things that matter.
Yeah.
That sort of attitude to life.
Probably fair. Yeah.
No, I think it's good. We could learn a lot.
We could learn a lot.
We could see if they'll come on this podcast.
Yeah, we'll ask
them. Can you imagine? Red Cross, if you're listening, which you're clearly not. We might be. Sorry if that was a dig. You might be listening. Wouldn't it be lovely if they were listening?
Well, they wouldn't have been able to find it. I think one of their mates probably said to them, there's this really great podcast that you two are going to love. It's all about joy and wonder.
Really
they're
nice
like, oh my God, joy and wonder are the things that we really like.
Literally all
What's it called? And they've said, well, it's called the Sohbet Podcast.
Should we change it to Red Cross, please listen to our podcast? And then maybe they will.
Punx.
Right,
we have talked on and on about not very much, really, and also sort of everything.
Yeah.
And in a way, that was what this episode was going to be about. We were initially going to discuss the Eightfold Path, which is a Buddhist concept. But we're definitely not going to do that now. But I think we will do that at some point because when I was listening back to the last episode, as I've already said, one of the things that really struck me was that we sort of went on this quite somewhat negative trip. We ended up talking about democracy a lot, and more or less saying that everything that we do in a democracy is sort of pointless or flawed. And I suppose by definition that means that everything that we all do,
it's the modern world, isn't it,
is pointless and flawed. And so I think we wanted to kind of come back at ourselves with why everything we do isn't flawed and why it is worthwhile to try to make our lives better.
I guess redirecting, yes, last time was all the this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, and it's like, okay guys, what are you gonna do about it? What's the right way?
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily saying that there is a right way, it's just that is it that helpful to keep pointing out things that are not helpful without
are we
talking about things that are helpful?
The problem.
Yeah, exactly that. So instead of having a bash at the world, we were going to try and think about the positive things, which I think we did a smidgen of just now. I have no idea really, but
no, we definitely did. And I mean, in that context, we should have just probably continued talking there, and I shouldn't have gone on about Red Cross. But
no, because Red Cross are wonderful, and it's just part of the same joy.
I think one of the problems with this subject is that if we're all realistic, and I think one of the reasons we've talked about this sort of crisis of meaning idea in the past, and we definitely talked about it last week as well. One of the problems is that I think that the human condition circa 2024 feels like nothing we do really is ever going to make much of a difference. So most of us choose to do the right things. So I know at some point sort of, the climate and recycling came up last time. And so we can all do that, right? We can all consider our choices based on, how much petrol it uses, or, we can always all make a decision to recycle or what have you. But by default, if I recycle every single thing that I possibly can, if, I don't know what company to pick.
A big corporation
decides not to bother.
Yeah.
Or even that they recycle as well, but they just maybe, for some other reason, it completely undoes any good work that I'm doing. And I think that's quite a good metaphor for sort of how that's kind of what we were getting at with democracy. And so, to some extent, is that we're both ill-equipped to provide a useful democracy for most of us. And also, we don't really make very much of a difference. Now, I think that all of that stuff is true, but I think that maybe what we're going to now talk about is more about so therefore what we can do is only really affect ourselves and our own lives. Yeah.
And by doing that, so long as we continue to be the social face-to-face interactive people, even if that's only with 3 other people, you thereby share that. It depends how you want to go. You either share that energy if you want to believe in energy systems. You share that knowledge if you're just going to have conversation about it. Your mannerisms, your general feel for life.
I quite like the songlines idea. I think maybe as a metaphor from now on, if we can remember. No, it's like learning. It's like learning a song. It's like learning bits of a song.
Yeah.
So what you pass on to other people is a little bit of your song that they can then add to their own.
100%. But then I think it is that many people who I appreciate their thoughts on things, maybe be they mystical or religious or just good speakers, almost always bring that very, very simple, but I think is entirely the main reason for any of this, is if you change yourself and thereby affect one person in any minor way, in a positive way, and then they continue, that ripple effect it becomes huge. It becomes something, even if it's just one person at a time. And I just think that's the only reason to do something. Not just that's the only reason, but you need no other reason. That's a perfect reason. So and this is what gets when we do feel small and we feel like we make no difference to a larger, how can me against 7 million other whatever ideas about a certain thing. I don't know, I'm just plucking numbers here. Whereas if you that one-on-one interaction with someone else, if it's positive, I just think that's so much more meaningful for you, for them, and that's all there ever is. You only have you in that particular moment right there and then, and you only have them, that other person, in that particular moment there and then. Whereas that kind of feeling of being lost in a sea of things you have no control over, except it's part of my way of being with that. I always thought it was ignorance, and in a lot of ways it is, but just accepting what you can and can't do things about, and being like, why? I don't want to get stressed about that thing anymore. The flip side is people will accuse you of being non-interested in these wider issues, or you could be seen as maybe not taking a stand when you should, which you can still do. Yeah. I just think there's something, I just really appreciate the one-on-one doing a thing. So, and it's also magic. If you recycle, you've done your bit. If everyone did that, fine. Yeah, that corporation might not do it, but if 8 million people, I'm saying million, but I think I'm meaning billion. If everyone in the world managed to do it, then we'd be fine.
Yeah, I think there's a few points there which are probably important. Because one of my concerns about this idea that you sort of make yourself better and therefore make the world better is that it can be. It sounds very similar and is almost completely indistinct from look after yourself. It's very much, it's very much how we all. It's very much just being about yourself.
Yeah.
So it's about the selfishness and what have you. And I don't think that we need to have any more selfishness in this world. But the point that you just made is exactly what the important thing is. It is about improving yourself in whatever ways you can, and improving your, if you improve your mood, for example, and you go into social interactions with other people in a more positive state, then you will improve their mood, and you will everyone will have a more positive experience. Now the problem is, so I listened to a podcast with someone that I had to turn off not too long ago, and it was an interview between two people, and the main guy, it was so they were mostly talking about sobriety. And the guy had actually been quite a heavy drug user and drank a lot and what have you. And he was very much talking about this exact thing, what we're talking about now. So he was saying that basically once he got sober, he decided to put all of his energy into himself, because he knew that if he made himself better, he would be. So he was like some highfalutin business owner, and so he would be like, if I make my company really brilliant, then I employ a load of other people, and so they have a good experience. If I make myself really brilliant, then I'm going to be a better father to my daughter. If I make myself really brilliant, I'm going to be a better husband to my wife. If I make myself really brilliant, then everyone that I meet on the other people that are getting sober, I can be an inspiration to them, this sort of thing. But he gave this example of, and he went down this road where he started to say, so the thing is I don't say sorry for anything that I've ever done now, because I know that it got me to this place. And it's got me to this place where I am. And he kept saying this, and it was getting a bit annoying on an egotistical point of view, but he kept saying this, I am like as good a father as you'll ever know, and a great husband, and all this sort of stuff. But the point I'm trying to make is that one of the examples he used was, he was talking about when he was at like rock bottom and he was on drugs and what have you, and I think he was homeless and all this sort of stuff. And he said that like he lost all of his friends for lots of different reasons, but one of the reasons that he lost all of his friends was because he got to a point where he just didn't care about his own life. He basically wanted to die. He didn't actually try and commit suicide, but he was more or less he just was doing enough drugs that he was hoping that he was going to die. And he said, I got so bad that I used to, like, I'm not proud of this, but there was times where I would just randomly just punch people. Like they would say the wrong thing that I didn't like, and so I'd just punch them, and I wouldn't explain it. But then he was talking about this thing as if it was kind of like this thing that he did, and he wasn't saying it proudly. He was definitely saying it as a negative thing. But at the end of it, he said, "But the thing is, see, I wouldn't change any of that, because what's happened is because I went through all of those things. It was worth
it to make me better.
It's made me a better person, and therefore I'm a better person for everything else." And the thing is, the immediate thing that I thought of, and I'm sure everyone who's sensible would think of, is, well, that's fine for you, but what about the people that got punched? Like, they might still be reliving that now. You know, he wasn't even talking about that long ago. It was only sort of 5 years before or something. And so, and I think that's metaphorically, that's quite a good example of where this can go wrong. Yeah. So it's kind of like, it's, I've recently been trying to sort of improve myself in lots of different ways. But if any of those ways that I was trying to improve myself had a negative effect on other people, even if it was like an obscure one that I'm not sure, maybe they do, and I just don't notice it. But even if it's, it's kind of like, right, from now on, I'm never going to tell a lie, right? Yeah. I'm going to be really honest on social media about all of my thoughts. Yeah. And this is a really good thing for me to do. But of course, sometimes being honest is going to be really negative for someone you're being honest about or something. So there is no absolute. So I think that you have to be careful when talking about this, but also when doing it.
Yeah.
To sort of not end up with that attitude.
Definitely.
It's not everything that you do to make yourself better is a good thing because it makes the world better.
Yeah.
The important thing, going back to what you were saying, the important thing is making yourself better so that you can share.
Yeah.
Sounds very religious. Sounds like a very religious concept, but it's so that you can share your, you know, and in religion. So in Christianity, for example, I'm sure they would say, I accept the teachings of Jesus into my life so that I can share them with other people, right? And that's fine for them, and you know that's all good. But I suppose it's like doing that, but in a secular way. It's doing that, but in I don't know. There's a lot of practical things that you can do, I think, that will make you better, you feel better, and then you can go on to pass that on. And you know, an example might be going back to your earlier thing about if you've read a book that's a really good book about a certain subject, and it just so happens that that's the book that someone needs at a moment in their life, even if it's in 20 years time, then you've done something good in your past that you can now pass on.
Definitely. And I think it's about not hoarding the good things. Like I think, like you say, you can, if you're just continuous on this self-improvement with no desire to be around other people and to share that for genuine, this is what Buddhism wrestles with the entire time. It's the bettering yourself to better serve other people, but not at the risk of your ego expanding over everything. So it's making yourself better to serve other people whilst not feeding your ego. And that's really, I mean, that's why the whole they've got masses and masses and masses of books about it, because it's so individualistic.
It's almost impossible, isn't it?
But yet it's about abolishing the ego to serve other people, yet the entire work is about working on yourself. It's an absolute mindfuck. I mean, when I first started reading about Buddhism, I was just like, why is there so many books and why is it just repeating the same thing over and over? And it's like, because it just takes fucking loads of times to get it in your brain and to really, and it's a practice and it's so hard, but the only way to do it is to do it. And I think whilst that is religious and philosophical, like you say, there's got to be secular ways of doing it for everyone. And I think this is where ancient stuff comes from, pre-religion is the helpful stuff. And it's about, you know, why is it that all of our prehistoric and earliest man and earliest tribal stuff is tribal, is family orientated, is group, is migratory, is all of these things that we now actively avoid, and we do cosplay online instead. One really interesting thing about the just to go back to it, singing and communication, is the in that songlines book he talks about ancestry and looking at fossilized earliest man and some of the big changes between hominids and when people came about, and it's our pelvis changed so we can stand up, and our brains got massive. But then the next thing,
not just stand up, darling.
Everyone could do that before, David.
I hope so.
But then,
otherwise there would have been no pelvises to widen.
But something else changed, and it's the palate of our mouth where our tongue touches the roof, and the only reason is for communication, and the only reason we have that is because we're social, we're migratory, and people have, because we're migratory, it's the singing again. People have kind of suggested it's this whatever. Before there was language, and yes, there was grunting. Everyone kind of acknowledges that people kind of shouted at each other or made noises at each other, but just this wonderful notion that he's trying to, like, because it would really fit with the thing he's looking into with the Aboriginal songlines. But he's trying to hint to this other person who's studying the history of man, like, do you think people sang? Do you think songlines were a thing? And this historian gets out a picture of like an early, it's like a modern watercolor based on an early cave painting, and it's of a family walking in a line. And she was like, yeah, look, These people walked and they would have needed to communicate in the nicest of ways. And I don't know, there's just something really lovely.
Were they singing like, everywhere we go?
Exactly that. That's where Scouts came from. But I just love this idea. There's just so many little nuggets like that are all just, it doesn't have to be religion. It's all pre-religion. It's just ritual, and it's just how tens of thousands of years of people like us, not exactly like us, but where we came from, existed. And I just think there's just little bit. This is why people go back to the ancient ways, and this is why people are deciding they're into neo-paganism, and people decided witchcraft is a thing, and it's all kind of not really what it may once have been. But it happened in the 50s when people were really disillusioned and reinvented all these things. Was because people were like, gosh, how do we connect again? And I think we're doing the same thing now. I think we talk about the meaning crisis an awful lot, and this is half of the reason for doing stuff like this. But yeah, I just think there's loads of things we can take from. It's what religion has formalized into religion, but I think stuff comes from before then. And I think that kind of remembering that whilst we're tiny and we can't affect much, we can affect those directly around us. And that's the whole point, in my feeling, of existing.
Well, that's tribal as well, isn't it? So I suppose in those times that you're talking about, we lived in tribes. And so now obviously we don't. But we, there's a sort of a modern day equivalent of a tribe, I suppose, which would be your family and friends, I guess, fundamentally, or potentially a group that you belong to for some other reason. Yeah.
But I feel like they used to be more connected. Like, I was talking to one of my friends about her kid, and how when I was her age, I was out every day, you're around your friend's house. And she said she's struggling, even though her kid is really engrossed in clubs, she's never in the house because she's always doing something. That hasn't led to friendship groups. And she said it's really weird. She goes, I've tried so hard to get these kids out of the house and not just sat indoors playing on games and not just on their phones, and they're not. But it hasn't led to social interaction in the way that was so easy for me growing up. And I think for you were like in more of a town/city than I was. I was in a village, so you had no choice but to go outside, play outside with anyone that was in the village, and you got along with everyone.
But it was exactly the same.
And I figure it's the same for you. Whereas I think now, like, she's really aware of the problems that could come. She's done really well to like get her kids, and her kids are so interested in so much stuff and they're so active, but yet their desire to hang out with other kids is just not there in the same way.
But maybe this is the problem with living in the society that we now live in, and there's not very much you can do about this. If that's absolutely the case, right, and so those kids have been brought up in a certain way, and they definitely have, let's just say they have what me and you would probably consider the perfect attitude for kids. They just want to be friends with other people, all of those things. How would a kid do that in 2024 when all the other kids do just want to stay at home and play on their computer games or look at their phones or whatever? In fact, how would you have that description that you gave of having a real life conversation with someone where you look into their eyes and you say words and they can hear them with their actual ears? You can always hear them with your ears. All right, it moves with
the actual ears as opposed to the
moves through the air. Physically, a physical thing has happened. And again, I know this isn't science.
Is it not?
But it's impossible to do that if you don't have other people around you that also want to do that. And in your life, like, how would you find people that necessarily want to do that? I mean, we're lucky in as much as, again, I bring this up every time pretty much, but I think of all of the sort of modern institutions that probably encourage actual physical existence, the punk scene is probably, it's not far from perfect, and it's definitely, I'm not saying we're sorted by any means, but it's as close to a tribe as you're probably going to get in 2024 in this context. But if you were a kid, I mean, Jesus Christ, how the fuck would you wouldn't have any, even if your parents were really bringing you up in that way, you really wouldn't have any understanding of what it would mean. The reason why you understood how important it was to go out and play with your friends is just because you did it, because that was expected of you. And so now you can look back on it, sure, and you can probably say, well, developmentally, that probably helped me get used to, other people's feelings. It provided me with some empathy. It made me want to independence, and gave me, it meant I had got fresh air. I probably didn't eat loads of shit because I was too busy out doing stuff.
True, yeah.
So there's all of these different things. And then I also, probably, slightly later on, or maybe not that much later on, I had other experiences. So, I smoked my first cigarette. I went out and got pissed. I had all of these, again, which added to the independence, added to the person that you become, gave you experience, all of these different things. But how would a child growing up now in a world where their parents are their best mate, they're not encouraged to go out. In fact, they're discouraged from going out because everybody thinks that they're going to get snatched by a paedophile, even though the crime rates show that that's the least likely thing that's of any time in history. They're all of their friends are only engaging on their mobile phones. All of the conversations that they're getting is going to be about something they've seen on TikTok, Netflix, or Facebook, or not Facebook because the kids aren't on it anymore, I don't think. How would you even know that you are missing out on anything?
Yeah.
You couldn't.
And it's just so strange just to hear from someone who's so aware of that and has really tried. And she was just saying to me, just really honestly, just like, she doesn't, I tried to say I was going to drop her, and she was saying I was going to drop her and her little friend off, is how she says it, because they're about to go to high school. She's in year 6, I guess. And she said, I was trying to drop her and her little friend off in town. I just said, look, just go out. Like, I'll come pick you up later, but be on your own. And the kid didn't want it. And she was just like, I'm trying. Age and she's such a good kid, honestly. Yeah. But she was just like, she's just like, I just don't know. I've done everything. She said she'd rather have gone shopping with me. And that's what you say about, like, parents are the best friends. And and again, like I say, such a good mum, has done everything really well, and is so like, they can go and make all the mistakes they like. And she'll never push. She knows when to push and when not to push. And there's a real societal pressure on her not to do that. That's the other thing. I mean, there's a famous story, it's from quite a long time ago as well, like at least 10 years ago, of a journalist who was in New York, and she wrote a piece about how I don't know how old the daughter was, but she was like 11 or 12 or something. And the daughter had taken the subway with her every day. And so one day she got the daughter to do it on her own. And she wrote an article about it and said, this is the thing that kids are missing out on. And it was all about that. She got absolutely fucking ruined. She lost her job. She was cancelled on Twitter. She all of this stuff. She was basically called the worst parent. I think there was an article in a paper that was like, the worst parent in the world. This child could have been, there's criminals all over New York City. There's paedophiles everywhere. The child, and of course all that happened was that the child just got on a train, got off the train at the other end and walked to her house, and nothing happened. But and that's a long time ago. There's even more pressure. I mean, it's funny because my parents are, well, not so much now, but they were, there's a slight over dramatization, but they were doing a lot for my nephews. I wouldn't say they were bringing them up, but they were playing a very active part in their lives. And of course, I know what my parents let me do, and they weren't the most lenient by any means, but at the time it was completely normal. So I know that from what age it was that I was allowed to go round the estate, and what age it was that I walked to school on my own, and all this sort of stuff. And now with my nephews, like my nephew's just turned 13. And it wasn't very long ago, and I don't know if this would still be the case, but my dad tried to hold his hands across the road, like only about 6 months ago. Now, trust me when I say this, my dad would never have held my hand to cross the road with me. There's many reasons.
Yeah, probably, but like, it was so bizarre because to watch that. But it's like, my parents haven't changed, but even to them, and they're very old people now. They're not really. It's not like they're on Facebook or anything.
Yeah.
But they are, even the societal pressure that gets through to them, and they're not even the parents, is like making them really like careful with these kids who are literally like, I'm like, fuck, man, they we were going and looking for porn in the woods and smoking cigarettes.
But now, like, every 6-year-old's aware of all their allergies and is probably being walked around on a leash. Like,
well, now you sound.
I know, I sound
News.
like a horrible person. But there's a really good, in case anyone's interested in this stuff, and even if you're not, I think it's a really good podcast to go and this particular episode anyway. Jonathan Haidt.
Yeah,
he's a child psychologist.
Well, he's written
professor.
a book too. So if you're a reader, the book is called The Anxious Generation.
There you go. And there's a podcast. Rich Roll is the podcast. It might be the one you were referring to earlier because he's a sober person. But
yes, that was. But I wasn't referring to Jonathan Haidt.
No. I know. But anyway, Rich Roll, very good podcast, very good person at interviewing, and Jonathan Haidt, most perfect voice and very, very good at explaining his point, and his point is extraordinary. And as someone who has no kids and has no intention of having kids, I still found it so interesting, and it's specifically about social media and what it's doing to people who are growing up with it, and incredibly thoughtful things about play and about independence and about all the things that we're losing. And I just thought of all of it while I was talking to my friend about her kid. I was like, oh my God, this is happening for real, even when there's someone who's really trying.
But another person who his previous book, which was called it's not called the mollycoddled generation, but it was something like that. But it was more or less a similar thing.
Yeah.
Also got cancelled and called a sort of internet
really?
person. Yeah, I can't remember exactly why, but it wasn't in any way extreme. I can't remember what it was.
But it happens. Well,
but it was. I think it was more or less about critiquing cancellations. I think he more or less said that. Therefore, I think it was. The idea was that people who had gone into university had not been prepped, not been provided with the sort of emotional intelligence that they needed to go into the real world. And so they were going into universities and they were dealing with all of the political debates that are going on in universities in really, really simplistic ways. And as a result of that, they were doing things like, there's a really famous one when a professor that said something like, I can't remember what it was, but it was more or less that they wanted to ban... It definitely was because it was in America, but let's just say they wanted to ban Winston Churchill because he once had slaves. And he said, well, I don't think we should completely ban them. I think that we should discuss this.
Yeah, we should talk about the complexities
and we shouldn't throw, more or less what we were saying earlier, actually. Like we shouldn't just ignore his wisdom or whatever. I'm not really talking about Churchill there, but anyway. But the
people
point,
who are complicated people from the past that did horrible things.
And as a result of that, they locked him in his room, and it was a terrible thing. It was quite a famous thing that happened at university, and it is really ugly because there's loads of footage of it and stuff. But the point is
huge
that
problem in America, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I don't know. Depends. I think people are making it sound huger than it is necessarily because it suits a lot of people's.
True.
So there is complications to this about the sort of people that would pick up on what I've just said and maybe use it as ammunition to say that, whatever. But the point is I think Jonathan Haidt just in that book, he just critiqued that and he just sort of said, well, it just seems like there's no freedom of speech, more or less. And got loads of shit about that. Yeah. Loads of shit.
I can imagine that he would get shit for what he is saying.
And such a nice man.
Oh my goodness. I know, he's so lovely and so well spoken. You just but anyway, that's not.
I feel like we've gone into this saying that we're going to talk about something positive, and we've sort of ended up going on a bit of a negative branch again. So I think we're going to have to continue this next week, and we're going to have a better go at it.
I think so. We've got a few things. I think this has opened a few things. We've got the thing we plan to speak about that will come up in either next or the week after, or who knows.
It was a messy episode.
It was mess. But back, we've reset. Sort of.
I don't know. Yeah? Let's say yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. If you have anything to add, or if you want to shout at us, if you want to mention anything, or say a good thing, or give us your thoughts on wisdom, or things that make you happy and bring you awe and wonder, that'd be really good, because we only have each other's, and I'd love to hear someone else's. For what? No, I'm joking.
If it's not the 90s heavy metal band Kilgore, then I don't know what it is.
If you've got a great experience of Kilgore, that'd be great to hear, because I only have Dave's terrible experience of it, and they must have enjoyed it. Someone must have enjoyed it. It was terrible, but someone must have enjoyed it. But yeah, anything you'd love to tell us, that'd be great. shamcityroasters@gmail.com is the best way.
And this podcast does happen every 2 weeks on a Thursday. So we will see you in 2 weeks' time. Next Thursday. No, the Thursday after next, I suppose. Well, it depends when you listen to this, doesn't it?
Who knows?
Who knows? Time doesn't really exist.
Time doesn't exist, and you're creating it with your own brain.
Indeed. Well, on that note, we will bid you adieu.
Bid you adieu.
Goodbye.
Bye.